That's fascinating. I know that when you start going through that change in life, so many things happen all at the same time, and it's not necessarily top of mind during the day, but you understand something else is changing, and if you don't change with it, like your eating habits and the type of food that you eat, it can cause a lot of distractions in your life and a lot of things that start to happen that wouldn't normally have happened a couple of years earlier.
Right. Yep, that's exactly true. Our bodies start changing over time and things start happening that didn't happen a few years ago. And we start thinking about it. What's going on here? How do I, I've eaten this way for so long. I've exercised this way for so long. Why is my body acting differently now? And our bodies are changing as we age, and we have to change with it in order to go through it in the most graceful way.
It was interesting also when you're talking about your daughter and having that reaction, a terrible reaction to the fake dyes, the food coloring dyes that they use. I had the same thing. I've got an allergy to red wine, and when I could drink a bottle of white wine, not having problems whatsoever. I drink one glass of red wine, I feel like I've got the flu for 2 to 3 days afterward. It's terrible. It wreaks havoc on my life. And every once in a while, I'll think, no, 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 this one doesn't have the sulfates in it or whatever, and I'll have a glass of wine. And the next day, I've got a massive headache. I didn't
Mhm.
have nearly enough to drink to have a headache, a hangover, but I'm just sick as a dog. So I can understand why your frustration was with your daughter,
Yeah.
and being able to really track down the cause and effect of the food dyes.
Yep.
So you, as a health coach, you've gone through that process. I'm guessing that each person is different, because I know that I know some people that are allergic to certain things, and other people are allergic to other things, and it may not even be an allergy, but they're reacting to something. I happen to have gone through a full battery of tests because I was very allergic when I was younger, and I found out I'm allergic to green peppers, I'm allergic to onions, I'm allergic to mangoes, I'm allergic to soybeans, and the soybean allergy turns into the fact that I'm allergic to Ford cars because their parts are soaked in soybean oil, which you can't make this stuff up, right? So it can go that crazy and that far. But as a health coach, tell me a little bit about how you go about finding out what is the underlying cause for some of these problems.
Well, that's quite an interesting story that you just led me into. I've never heard anything going that extreme before, but that was pretty good investigating to uncover it. And part of part of the role of a health coach is being an investigator. So when we go to we have done grocery store tours before and teach people how to navigate a grocery store. It seems like common sense, but it's new for people who aren't experienced in wellness. And not everybody is experienced in wellness, and people don't know where to begin. So beginning with a health coach and doing something as basic as a grocery store tour, you're being an investigator when you're looking at food labels. You're being an investigator when you look at labels on your lotion and your shampoo and things like that. So we want to uncover what's causing the symptoms and issues that people are experiencing. And there's so much overlap, so many things that overlap in symptoms. So someone might have high estrogen and have the same symptoms that someone with high cortisol might have, or low something else. There's a lot of overlap between that stuff. So it's important to be working with a good functional medicine doctor, or have a good practitioner on your wellness team that can run a hormone panel, a complete panel, and get to the bottom of what's imbalanced. And then once you know what's imbalanced, a coach can help you in so many ways on peeling back those layers on what's causing that imbalance, and how can we work to support your body in a way that'll get you back to balance and get you through these changes gracefully again.
You brought up a term that I'm familiar with, or I'm aware of, and not familiar with, cortisol. Can you kind of go through a little bit about what cortisol is, why we need it, why we don't need it? What does it do, and what are the effects?
So cortisol is our fight, flight, or freeze hormone. So you can think about it if you have a lion chasing after you, or if you're stuck in traffic and people are honking their horns and people are cutting you off, or you're in a near miss accident and you have that feeling in your body, that's cortisol. And we need cortisol. We need that, our body to be able to respond in the right way and at the right times. But what happens is when people have like a chronic physical stress on the body or mental or emotional stress, and a physical stress, it could mean like a marathon runner or a power lifter or someone with like a really physically demanding heavy work that they're doing nonstop. Things like that are putting a chronic stress on the body. Or the other scenarios I mentioned are mental or emotional stresses. Someone who could experience a significant trauma or other things like that. It could be people that are going through extreme dieting or disordered eating.
So we need cortisol, but I'm confused as to, it sounds like it could create road rage. It could create all sorts of physical reactions in males that are not necessarily positive. What is it? Is there a point in time where cortisol tips over the bucket and all of a sudden it causes a lot of problems?
The same with all our hormones. We want, if you've heard of the homeostasis, it's balance. We want balance in the body. Everything in our body has a purpose. And when one's out of whack, it tends to put others out of whack. So our cortisol has a very important purpose in our body. But when we're stressing our body out, either physically, emotionally, or mentally, we're causing that cortisol to be raised too much. So chronic elevation of our cortisol is not a good thing. And it does cause things, it does cause issues in the body. Like when someone's feeling, well, actually, there's one more thing before I lose my train of thought. When you were mentioning that those food allergies, before you knew you had those allergies, you were eating those foods.
Yes.
Somehow you were feeling some kind of way from them that ultimately led you to get tested and figuring that out. But that stress on your body was causing cortisol to raise.
Okay.
So that's another example right there. But symptoms of that, I want to move into that. The symptoms of elevated cortisol, that can, someone might be tired, but they're wired, right? They're tired, but they can't fall asleep. Or they could be stressed out and have anxiety and be nervous and be up and on high alert all day. Yet when it's time to go to bed, you can't fall asleep. So our cortisol is at its highest point in the morning, and then it's supposed to slow down over the day. And then at nighttime, you should be able to go to bed and go to sleep and have a restful quality night's sleep. But sometimes that isn't always the case. And people with chronically high cortisol, it might be peaking later in the day rather in the morning when it's supposed to be. So in that kind of example, it causes difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep.
Wow,
And during the day,
I've never heard of that before. That's amazing.
yeah. And during the day, it can cause people to have that brain fog, right? Or just feeling constantly distracted or not able to focus on any one thing. And it can cause other things, like it can interfere with fertility. And women can have a hard time conceiving a baby, or it messes with their cycles. They're not having a routine monthly cycle. And these are all symptoms that can happen from that high cortisol.
Wow. So it almost sounds like it might be the underlying cause of ADHD.
Their symptoms can parallel. Their symptoms can, there can be a lot of crossover, and there's a lot of crossover with a lot of the hormonal imbalances. So you might have symptoms of anxiety and depression in a high cortisol, but you also might have that in high estrogen. So there's a lot of crossover in a lot of the hormonal imbalances.
Okay, all right. Let's move on and talk about the thyroid. I know that we've got in my family we've had some thyroid issues, and well, one of my siblings is on thyroid medicine for the rest of her life. They killed it completely off,
Mhm.
and I realized how important the thyroid is. And my father-in-law, same thing. He does no thyroid activity whatsoever, and it's a major cause of potential medical problems. Can you talk about a little bit about the thyroid and how it is managed and what we need to watch out for to protect it?
Yeah, so thyroid disorders are more common than people think, and a lot of times their unexplained symptoms can be a result of thyroid imbalance. So people experience, so a low thyroid, symptoms from that can be dry skin or dry hair or hair falling out, having brittle and breaking nails. And another symptom is cold hands and feet. Like it might be a warm time of year and everybody's comfortable, but that one person with the thyroid, one or more, because it's so common, have cold hands and feet and are always cold or tired or just feeling like, just blah. Unexplained weight gain, that's a common one with low thyroid. And there's no reason for it. You might be eating well, you might be doing all the things that you've always done, but when your thyroid isn't responding appropriately, it can cause that weight gain.
So how do you manage thyroid? I know that there's hyper and hypo, and people get on these drugs, which are you know I'm so grateful for big pharma for the ability to come up with these drugs, and I also say that with caution because big pharma has I've seen what they've done with with their ability to earn money off of the drugs and make more and more people use the drugs that they've got out there, whether they should be or not. So what can you do about thyroid that's homeopathic, or are you just kind of stuck with a MD and being on the pills the rest of your life?
Well, there's a lot of things we can do to support our thyroids. Um, Nutritional deficiencies can cause that imbalance too. So making sure we have enough selenium and iodine and vitamin D in our bodies and enough protein in our bodies, limiting the chemicals that we put on our bodies. So burning a candle, even candles have fragrances in them, right? Those artificial fragrances are not good for our hormonal health.
Well, and I've also heard that a lot of those candles, depending on where they're made from, will have lead in the wick, which causes all sorts of respiratory issues.
Right. Yep, exactly. So along with that, it's no good for our hormonal system either. Or um, when you go visit a friend or something and you use their restroom or just walking through the house and they have those plug-in things with the flavors and fragrances in there. Like if I walk in and I see that immediately, I don't want to be there. I want to be outside or I want to be somewhere else because I know that's not doing any good for my body. House smells nice, but it's not doing any wonders for my hormonal health. And it definitely impacts the thyroid. So limiting things like that. And um, gluten is often a big trigger for thyroid. So
What's that?
gluten, gluten, like, so when you're eating gluten that comes
Oh,
in like,
gluten.
yeah,
Gluten. Yeah.
yes. So a lot of times eliminating gluten from the diet, adding in iodine and selenium. Selenium is Brazil nuts. That's Brazil nuts. Are most people with thyroid disorders are fans of Brazil nuts because you can have usually 3 Brazil nuts is the serving, and that's enough to get some selenium in your body, and it's something that you can be taking every day. Limiting the xenoestrogens and just eating on a cleaner diet. eating a cleaner diet, limiting the alcohol, getting good quality sleep. And I know I'm familiar with the thyroid because I struggle with it as well. So I have to work harder than an average person to keep my thyroid balanced. And I manage it now with an over-the-counter supplement, but there was a time that I was on medication for it.
I understand that. One of the things you were talking about was clean, eating clean. Give me a elevator pitch on what eating clean actually means. What my wife's been bugging me about making sure that we buy everything organic. It's twice as expensive as anything else, and I keep thinking at the molecular level, does it make any difference if it's organic or not organic when I'm eating it? And I think she's starting to get me to switch my viewpoint over to organic is really the way to go.
Well, you know what, Richard? One of the things I always say is you pay for your wellness now or your sickness later, right? So you want to eat the cleanest food possible with the lowest amount of chemicals and things on it. So there's, if you've ever heard of the Dirty Dozen or the Clean, is it the Clean 15 or the Clean 15, the Clean 15, the Environmental Working Group has an app that you can download, and it tells you the foods with the most toxins on them. And one that's usually up there on the top, I haven't looked at it too recently, but one that's usually on the top is strawberries. Now you're eating strawberries because they're good for you, but they retain so much of the pesticides that are sprayed on them, not something you can wash off of them. So that's all going right in your body. Those are cancer-causing chemicals. So eating clean, eating organic, eating food you grow. Kristen and I have tower gardens. We grow our greens and our herbs, and sometimes over the summer we grow tomatoes, and you can grow cucumbers and things like that. We grow in our own tower gardens. So we know what's in our food. We're growing it ourselves.
It was interesting because I read an article recently. I don't even know if this is true or not, that they spray almonds with glyphosate, which is Roundup, which I couldn't believe that that is actually on the almonds that we consume.
It's on a lot of food we consume. It's on a lot of the food. That's why it is important to eat as organic as possible. Your beef, you want it to be grass-fed, pasture-raised beef, right? You don't want conventionally raised and processed meats, because this is one of the things that have changed over time as nutrition science has evolved. We used to think that meat in general it causes instant inflammation in the body, and it doesn't. It's conventionally raised meat on grain and in things that they shouldn't be eating, rather than a grass-fed, pasture-raised cow.
Wow.
That's a healthier product for the body. Same thing with your chickens. You want your free-range chicken, or your fish, you want wild caught fish. You don't want farm-raised fish, because there's too much chemicals and toxins and things that we don't want in our food.
So that's really the definition of clean eating.
Mm-hmm.
So as we come to the close of the webinar, what I wanted to do a little bit was have you go through the list of programs you got available on stopchasingwellness.com, and what we've just kind of scratched the surface here on a couple of topics, but to get down into the nitty gritty to really understand things, how do we get to that next level? Where do we go?
So visiting us on the website, stopchasingwellness.com, you'll find our podcast. You'll find our book that Kristen and I wrote. We have a Manage Your Blood Sugar Like a Boss program available. These are online programs available for download. They can be worked at your convenience, and we're available for coaching support as well. We have a Menopause Goddess program. We have an Eating for Hormone Health, and we have a bunch of free downloads on there as well. 24-hour metabolic launch. That's a good one. Everybody seems to love that one as well. We love it. And ways to reach us for individual coaching as well as group coaching.
So they can book you for an individual one-on-one session to get
Mhm.
you to start peeling back the onion skin and figure out what's going on inside their problems, medical
Yep.
and yeah, emotional. I understand that. That's great. Well, I'll make sure that we have a link at the end of this so that they can click on it and get right to your website and start exploring all the different options. And I want to
Perfect.
thank you for your time today, and you're most insightful. Just amazing as the breadth of knowledge you've got on all these topics that I don't know anything about. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.